Good morning. When the weather is nice, and sometimes when it's not, I like to take a walk in the late afternoon before the sun sets. I go at a moderate pace usually. There's no rush, but I like to exert myself a little bit so I don't just amble. And during the second week of January, about 4 years ago now, I started to notice, about 5 minutes into the walk, a tightness and then a pain around the area of my heart. If I slowed down, the pain went away, but sometimes I actually had to stop and wait a minute before it felt safe enough to resume walking. After about a week of this, I made a same-day appointment to see my primary care physician. He made it clear that I should get to the emergency room of the local hospital as soon as possible. From the emergency room, I was admitted to the hospital for tests. When I took the cardiac stress test on a treadmill, I told the cardiologist to stop it within the first 3 minutes as the pain was coming on. He was surprised that I couldn't continue with so little exertion. There were a number of tests in all, and on day 3, I was booked for an early morning catheterization. The diagnosis was coronary artery disease. 2 significant blockages were found in the main artery going into the heart at a location they referred to as the Widowmaker. Fortunately, a single stent was sufficient to address both blockages. A day after the procedure, I was released, and late that afternoon, I resumed my neighborhood walks. So for several days, there was an acute cause for concern. And then there was a cause for relief and gratitude. On my first day in the hospital, the first 2 nurses who took my blood pressure, took blood, and cared for me were particularly solicitous and thoughtful. They were also very young. I had a hard time believing how young they were. And one of them had actually attended some services at the UU Church of Bowling Green, surprise, surprise. Some of the nurses after that were brusque and seemed like they just wanted to get past an unpleasant task and be done with it. Maybe they were dealing with stress of their own. Maybe they were just impatient people. I had reason to be grateful that everything went smoothly, though, and reason to be especially grateful for the first day's care. My friend Sherry planned to see me in the morning before the procedure. She arrived a few minutes after I was wheeled to the room where the operation was performed, so we missed each other, and that was something of a disappointment. Once the stent insertion was completed, I was wheeled into a recovery room where she was waiting for me, a big smile on her face. She stayed with me the whole morning and most of the afternoon before she had to leave for a meeting. Then, at home, she fed my cat, washed the dishes, made the bed, and made sure the house was secure for the night. She did not make it on time to visit me before the procedure, but she stayed with me most of that day. Which of these events should I focus on? I remember reading one time that in one of his essays, the social critic and all-around gadfly H.L. Mencken made a list of all his physical ailments, and that the list went on for quite a while. The writer who referenced this called him a hypochondriac. But I wonder if he was right. Maybe he was right. But I found that the first step towards gratitude often includes taking inventory of where you are, including your challenges and abilities, a status report, so to speak. So if you bear with me, I'll share with you some of the items that I came up with when I made a list of my own. Significant hearing loss in both ears, chronic lower back pain, proneness to kidney stones, high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol levels, flat feet, also known as fallen arches, particularly painful this week, torn anterior cruciate ligament in the right knee, torn plantar plate ligament in the second toe of the right foot, an allergy to every kind of pollen there is, dry eyes, weak ankles, farsightedness, astigmatism, color blindness, eczema, and an ingrown toenail on the big toe of my left foot. Well, it seems that I'm a walking human wreck. Before we settle on that as a permanent diagnosis, though, let's take a look at some of the mitigating factors. The cardiac disease was successfully treated without open heart surgery, which would have required a year's recovery. The continuing treatment includes taking aspirin as a blood thinner every day for the rest of my life. And for the 6 months after the procedure, an additional medication that costs $383 a month. The company that produces the medication provided the first month's supply at no cost. The cardiologist provided an additional 4-week supply of samples. During the initial period of a couple of months, I was able to arrange for the cardiologist to prescribe a replacement medication that has no cost to me. And I am consciously grateful for these developments. My hearing loss has caused me lots of problems over the past several years. Huh? After the first pair of hearing aids got destroyed after going through both the wash and drying cycles in an overlooked shirt pocket, I went without hearing assistance for a year, unwilling to invest another several $1,000s to address the problem. One night, after a presentation at the planetarium at the local university, WKU, the director of the program, whom I knew from his attendance at our UU churches, told me that he might have a solution for me, as his mother had recently got new hearing aids, and perhaps her old ones could be adjusted to meet my needs. And so it turned out. It cost me $565 for the adjustment, but for hearing aids that list for $3,800, I'm grateful indeed that Ron made that offer. I'm still impatient with having to wear them, but I'm grateful for the improvement that they have provided. Other people are too. When my knee pain was diagnosed as a result of an anterior cruciate ligament, I was told that surgery would probably not help due to the fact that the area of the ligament that was torn receives so little blood flow. I was told to just stay off it as much as you can. But I found out that a regimen of swimming 4 times a week, 30 minutes at a time, strengthened the knee so much that I rarely experienced pain. I'm grateful for that. Custom-made orthotics help with the flat feet, at least until recently. Medication has helped a lot with the high blood pressure and the cholesterol, and I'm grateful that medications have been developed and that I can afford them. Reading glasses have nicely addressed the vision problems now that the cataracts have been removed. My optometrist in Kentucky is also a friend, and I'm grateful for the care that I've received from him. It's important that I trust the professionals that provide my care. I could go on, but you get the idea. It's no blessing to be living with such a list of health concerns, but what a blessing it is that the medications have been developed, Medicare is in place, and perhaps most of all, that friends have stood by me in my times of need. One of my favorite readings from our hymnal is from Wayne Arneson. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down, there is another truth. You are not alone. I hope none of us here feels alone. It's one of the purposes of spiritual community, of course, to make sure that we all feel part of something larger than ourselves, that we feel cared for, that we feel that we can count on one another in times of need. Loneliness, according to a February 2019 article in Psychology Today, has reached epidemic proportions. According to a survey conducted by MD Links and published in January 2019, Up to 47% of Americans report suffering from loneliness, double the rate of just a few decades ago. Loneliness is correlated with an increased risk of mortality, risk rates similar to obesity and smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I want to talk to you today about self-care as well as gratitude, because I think there is a link between taking what responsibility we can for taking care of ourselves and realizing the blessings in life that are conferred by others or that come about through what Christians call grace. When I retired as a settled minister of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Bowling Green in July 2017, I entered a period of exile of sorts, as I detached from the church that had been my spiritual home for several years, 8 years. I had read that people without a reliable network of friendships, especially as we get older, face an increased risk for a number of concerns: heart disease, alcoholism, obesity, depression, and suicide among them. I determined that I would do whatever I could to make sure I didn't fall victim to any of these. I attended services at seven different churches until I found one that seemed the best, if not a perfect fit, though it meant driving 30 minutes to Morgantown every Sunday. I found sermons there to be thoughtful, challenging, well-grounded in a liberal interpretation of Scripture, and faithful to the teachings of Jesus. I also found a community that was warm and welcoming. And I realized that there were 6 people in town whom I had developed friendships with, people without a connection to the UU Church. I contacted them on a regular basis for lunch dates or to get together for coffee or a beer. And those friendships only strengthened as a result. I started a book group with a small group of friends. We met periodically for a couple of hours of discussion and fellowship. I joined a long-established book group at the Warren County Library. I met once a month with a group of friends to play poker for nickels, dimes, and quarters. And I kept up my jail visits, jail worship services, and mentoring a 7-year-old at a local elementary school. In other words, I did what I could to take care of myself. And I developed a gratitude practice. It started as a weekly practice, then moved to twice weekly, and then a daily practice. As a weekly practice, at the end of every week, I looked back at the events of the week just past, and I made a list of things that I was grateful for. In many cases, I found myself grateful for blessings received for things beyond my control. In other cases, I'm grateful for having had the energy and initiative to take on projects that I might not necessarily be excited about, mowing the lawn or mulching the leaves, coming near to the top of the list pretty regularly. To give you an idea of what I'm talking about, I'll share with you some examples so that you can see how broad the categories can be. The absence of any indication of heart problems since the stent was installed in 2019. The satisfaction that comes from sermon writing, getting thoughts on paper in a way that I can share with others. A good meeting with my counseling client as she continues to make progress in learning how better to advocate for herself. Watching the titmice, nuthatches, chickadees, blue jays, an occasional red-headed woodpecker at the bird feeder outside my door. The experience of reading a book about a spunky, curious, and adventurous little girl named Anne of Green Gables. An extensive Facebook exchange with Newton Catholic High School alumni during which they expressed appreciation for my teaching and relationship with them. Getting a good night's sleep last night. A nice 60-minute phone chat with a friend in Pennsylvania. The passing of a kidney stone without surgical intervention this time. Watching a good and intriguing Netflix movie called The Wonder Friday evening. Being able to meet all my financial obligations. A series of enjoyable and productive cottage meetings with church members. The income I received from a counseling session. a tasty lunch at the Thai restaurant on Tuesday, a nice visit with our church's former minister, Reverend Tricia Tumino, on Friday. By the time I complete this list, my heart is filled with gratitude as I realize how rich an experience my life is. I feel it again as I share it with you now. The blessings in our life can fade from our memory if we don't refresh those memories in a conscious way. The things that live in the subconscious become conscious through recall, and the process of making memories becomes concrete by writing them down. All of this is not to deny the conflicts and hardships in our lives. I'm someone for whom anxiety is the default setting, so there's never a time that my mind drifts too far from stressors, deadlines, bills, dealing with technological challenges, confronting self-imposed tasks. In fact, adopting a practice of gratitude is one of the significant factors that allows me to move through life in a way more positive than negative. Some of you might think this conscious practice of seeking things to be grateful for is unrealistic, Pollyanna-ish even. Pollyanna is a book written by Eleanor Porter and published in 1913, part of a wave of books published in a period of a few years, written primarily for girl children that includes Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm and Anne of Green Gables. Out of curiosity, and because in retirement I tried to catch up on books that I had meant to read for decades, I read Eleanor Porter's little book a few years ago. I came away from it questioning the stereotype of Pollyanna. Yes, she's taught by her father to look for the silver lining, to look for the good, even in the midst of disappointment and misfortune. But that does not come easy. That is a spiritual discipline. It's not the practice of denial, or at least it shouldn't be. It's a practice of acknowledging the difficulties we confront in life and consciously choosing a perspective that leads to good mental health and spiritual prosperity. I expect that almost all of you have been asked, when on a visit to your doctor, to fill out a checklist that includes a few dozen medical conditions. Do you now, or have you ever had epilepsy, diabetes mellitus, lower respiratory infections, shingles, chronic pulmonary obstructive disease, cancer, tuberculosis, cirrhosis, arthritis, traumatic brain injury, celiac disease, Crohn's disease, ear infections, fibromyalgia, gallstones, asthma, etc., etc. Don't you feel a burst of gratitude each time you can slide by that box without putting a check inside it? And if you are unfortunate enough to suffer from some of these conditions, and believe me, I don't mean to make light of them by listing them in this way, isn't it true that quite often you have cause to be grateful for the treatment that's available? And isn't it often true that you have a support system you can count on in times of need, within this church as well as outside of it, and a car that can get you to a hospital in case of an emergency, and a hospital that's close enough to you that you can get to it in time. I'm sure that many of you, like me, have a Facebook account and probably are members of various groups. One of the groups I'm a member of is for ministers, and it's called Things They Didn't Teach Us in Seminary. It's a forum where ministers share concerns, look for advice, share information, and community. A while back, I posted, I didn't learn in seminary how central a spiritual practice is gratitude. And I was overwhelmed by the response, as over 100 people responded in one way or another. One minister commented that he incorporates a gratitude practice into his evening devotions. Whether it's in the evening or in the morning, most of us can find 10 minutes where we can sit down, pen and notebook in hand, and reflect on our lives with gratitude for friendships, life events, remedies, moments of joy, moments of connection. I'll close with a suggestion and an offer. If you're fortunate enough to be in a partnered relationship, the two of you might wish to share your gratitude lists, perhaps on a Saturday afternoon or evening. If you mention something that you're grateful for that occurred during the work week, you might find that it leads into a nice discussion as you get a chance to expand on the significance of the event, tell a story, and interact with your partner in a way that you otherwise might not. And I invite each of you to take a few moments during our period of sharing joys and concerns today to come forward and share with your spiritual community something you are grateful for. The Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that every breath is a miracle. In times of stress, you can connect with the deepest part of yourself by consciously taking a few deep breaths. You are alive. Be grateful for that.